All right. Well, welcome to another episode of Break Time Off the Show. We have an amazing guest who's joining us today. I'm Josh, as you know, Josh, the CEO of Break Time, and we have Josh Williams joining us today, who is the Director of Brand Experience over at JMS. Josh and I go way back, so excited to have you officially on the podcast, Josh.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. One note I just want to make is that both of our comments today will be our own personal opinions and not those of the companies that we represent, but we're all going to talk about all the things. But yeah, for starters, I see some really cool variety of books behind you. I know you have a lot of creative passions and things going on in your world, but would you mind kind of telling us a little about those and kind of what fuels you as of late?
Yeah, I always tell my wife, I'm like, if I had a different life, I would have definitely been an architect. And so one of the things I've really enjoyed is we bought a fixer-upper house back in 2012. And literally we've spent like the last, what is it now, going on 14, 15 years here, slowly but surely remodeling the house. And so this was a project that we did a few years ago. I'm in our basement of our house, and we basically took a blank slate, and we now have, a pretty cool bar situation, a nice wine cellar. I'm in my wife's library. And so many of these are all her books. I got one little shelf behind me. We have about 8 of these little shelf units here. And so she gave me one. And so it's the one behind my computer screen, but the other 7 are all of her mini books. And so it's kind of fun. But yeah, we have a cool library. That's kind of neat, huh?
Yeah, super cool. Do you have a favorite book or two, either back there or that you're reading right now?
Ooh, that is a really good question. Yeah. I would say probably one of my favorite books of all time is The Odyssey. And so that's a book that I have with me. I'm super excited about the movie coming out this summer. But, honestly, so much of my book reading these days has now kind of changed a little bit. I'm now a bit of a comic book nerd, going back to my childhood days. I hadn't read comic books in quite a while, but I got back into it a couple years ago.
I love that. I would love to hear a little more too about kind of what's tapping into that passion and how it's adding value to your life.
Yeah, sure. It's funny. It was kind of an unexpected situation for me. So one night I remembered I had a couple, big boxes of comics in the house that I hadn't looked at in, 30 years, and kind of took a trip down memory lane. It was something that my comics were something that my godfather got me into. It was kind of a way for me as a kind of a high school kid that didn't have a lot of strong, I don't want to say like big friends groups or anything. I always felt like a little bit of like a kid that was involved in all kinds of different things, choir and comics and art and things like that. So I never felt like I was in like a main group. So the comics were kind of like that outlet for me. And so it was fun to kind of revisit that a little bit. And then I tell you what, once I started getting back into reading a few of those of my favorite stories, I tell you, it just became kind of a little bit of a black hole. Ended up going down and purchasing a bunch of the classic comic stories. But to your ask, I do use it quite a bit in my own life too. It's a bit of, this was unexpected to me. It is definitely a source of inspiration and creative for me. One of the things I love about comic books is it's also kind of a moment in time. I read a lot of books from the 60s and 70s and 80s, and it's really fascinating to see how comics, weaved in Watergate or, the first signs of like pollution and things like that in our culture, or LGBTQ issues. It's fascinating to see how those were fit in those time windows, and then being able to use some of the learning, some of the stories, some of the creativity from that as inspiration even into today, to kind of come with a different perspective or something fresh into the work that I do.
I love that approach. Such a cool way to kind of tap into a passion, something that you grew up with, bring it into modern day life, and then apply it to your everyday job. That's awesome. Definitely inspiring to think about. As we think about, the role that you've now found yourself into, from a kid reading comic books and Inquire to, running director of brand experience at Smucker, that's quite the journey. I think we have a lot of people who would be listening who maybe are earlier on in their career or in an agency side, always wanting to go brand side. Would you mind kind of walking us a little bit through your journey from, I think you were like communication studies major. I know you spent some time at Target on the agency side, moved over to brand, but kind of just like walk us through the journey and kind of what you think allowed you to have so much success in your career arc.
Yeah, good question. So I went to a liberal arts college, which meant I kind of almost like kind of foraged my own path in terms of what I wanted to do. I was a communication studies major, but I also knew I kind of really wanted to get into advertising. It wasn't a major that was offered at my college. And so I took, art classes and drawing classes. I took psychology courses, anything that I kind of felt would make me a real well-rounded thinker and help me kind of jump in and establish what I would want to do in my career. From there, and this has been kind of almost like a perfect circle for me. I've jumped into more of like the brand side of things, and I used to run basically wore all the many, many marketing hats at the Ronald McDonald House Charities here in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where I live. Um, that forced me to learn public relations, creative, brand building, all kinds of different things. And it was kind of like a big deal, like, hey, we're going to throw everything out at you, learn it all. I then kind of took a step back and was like, you know what? I think I kind of want to refine some things, get a little bit more focused, which ended up bringing me to agencies world, to Target world too. And so I used to work for Target Corporate, was more so in their division where they were doing their in-store merchandising and just like their signing in store. And then I went agency life, and that was kind of an interesting perspective too. And I think what I love about that is I received, before jumping all back into like the brand world here at Smucker Company, we talk about those, that kind of like that Venn diagram of you have to meet your consumers, you have to meet the customer, the retailer, and then you have to meet your brand. Well, I was able to get the Target experience. I got the agency experience, and then I was able to come in and get the brand experience. And so I think it provided me a little bit of a kind of an interesting perspective to bring to my work. But I do think in terms of anybody that's looking to break into the industry here, one, I think working agency is hugely important. I think anything that you can be a little bit more service focused, being a servant leader, I think in advertising and marketing is a really strong quality. And so I've always felt like, that time at agency, it was hugely important to me. Now I'm a bit more of a planner. And so I had a hard time. The like hours were like one day you're working 12 hours, the next day you're working 4. I want to plan out my week. And so that's ultimately why I really kind of wanted to go more brand side, to get that, structure for myself. That was important for me. But I do think like, kind of taking a path, trying some different things is hugely important because it helps you land on where you want to go.
I love that. Appreciate the perspective. I think a few interesting things in there that you talked about. One of them is just like the commerce routes that you took from Target through agency coming up, knowing the agencies you're working in. Really before it was talked about as commerce, but like shopper marketing, consumer promotions, those tactics. And then coming into brand, I think most people think brand leaders and they think Don Draper style ideas or, Wharton MBA programs and people kind of coming in. But as things are evolving in an omni world and, commerce is really becoming the core of what brands do need to think about across all channels, how do you think that background has prepared you to be a little bit of a different kind of brand leader and brand experience marketer?
Yeah, honestly, it has been a game changer. And I would say at the James Smucker Company, we have several leaders in this company that started in shopper marketing. And I think the pairing of understanding how retail works and getting very deep into that retail space, you're getting far closer to the consumer themselves too. And then having the ability to jump into the brand side where you're understanding a little bit more about like what your company is trying to achieve, those goals, being able to marry them both is hugely important. And it is a bit of an unlock because sometimes I do feel like sometimes like corporate cultures can be a little bit of an echo chamber a little bit because you're sitting at your company, you're talking with everybody in your little world there in wherever your company might be based. You're not always out and about with the retailer, understanding, like doing shop alongs, doing that critical research with your customers that you sometimes get with shopper marketing. And so I do feel like that was a pretty positive unlock. And certainly I would also say too, it actually kind of changed a little bit of how we think through creative as well. And so I've definitely kind of tried to guide and steer us a little bit down a different path that is a little bit more focused sometimes when it makes sense to start with kind of like, let's start at instead of, sometimes they would always say like, hey, we go from screen to shelf. We try to start a little bit more sometimes when it makes sense from shelf to screen. And so bringing the consumer in, the end user at the get-go, and then building campaigns from that can be incredibly powerful.
I love that. When you think about changing that around, going from screen to shelf or instead shelf to screen, are there any campaigns that come to mind that you've worked on as of late that kind of followed that methodology?
Yeah, yeah. Um, it's kind of funny. We're working on a campaign right now that's about to launch this summer, but it's basically, so I work on our coffee brands, and so our coffee brands are Folgers, Dunkin' Donuts coffee for at home, and then Cafe Bustelo. And so, Cafe Bustelo, we're working on a really cool campaign for the summer, and this campaign basically leverages some special packaging. And so, this was something where we started off with a really interesting, cool packaging concept and idea. It's deeply authentic to who we are as a Latin heritage brand here in the United States. We recorded all of our work too in Mexico with a Latin production company, and so it still stays really deeply authentic to who we are. And so that whole authentic experience, we're trying to bring that to shelves. And so this packaging and this product will come out here in June. I can't share much, or I'm sorry, May. So I can't share much more than that. But the campaign itself is pretty neat in that it leveraged the packaging concept. And then we took that and we just ran with it. And so then we went down and we executed a film. We have social, we have, all kinds of different influencer connection points. We have experiential that goes with it. I'm super excited about, for everybody to see it when it comes to real life, but, it's a truly unique way of kind of thinking, and it kind of flips that, general idea of like, hey, no, you can start with a film and then everything else kind of are tentacles from that. Instead, it starts with the pack itself, the packaging itself, and then the tentacles go out to all the other media channels.
I mean, quite literally shelf to screen all the channels, right? That way, if you're starting with the product itself in the package, it's awesome. Well, I can't wait to see that. I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes. I know other campaigns too, you've been doing lots of reimagining and modernization as of late. One that comes to mind too, we actually were in a company on site this week and we were doing all sorts of activities. One of them was like building our own company jingles, and then researching some of the most iconic jingles of all times. The best part of waking up is Folgers in your cup. And obviously I know Folgers, you've been working on kind of a big brand re-architecture and campaign. There are a lot of buzz in the news lately, but would you mind walking us through kind of Folgers and the projects you've been working on there?
Yeah, it's fun. Working for a company like Smucker Company, we have so many established, massive American brands, and everybody knows and loves Folgers, Jif, Meow Mix, Milk-Bone, so on and so forth. Everybody knows those brands. They're heritage brands. They've been in your pantry for 100 plus years. But it also comes with it, quite frankly, like a lot of challenges. And so, with Folgers, that's a brand that I think, for you and I, Josh, I mean, our parents had it in their pantry. We grew up, we kind of grew up in that Starbucks culture a little bit, where we started going to the shops, and that's where we got our coffee. And it was always, well, Folgers is mom and dad's coffee. Like, this other brand is my coffee. And so the challenge has been for us as we start to continue to age down is just, how do we continue to capture new users into our portfolio and new consumers? Because we know we have a darn good cup of coffee, but we need to make sure that people, it resonates with a younger demographic. And so to your point in the best part of waking up, the one thing that is really intrinsic to Folgers, the space that we really truly own, is that wake up space. All of our consumer research tells us that, when people think of Folgers, they think of us as their partner in waking them up during the day. And so, this was basically, I feel like it was just like low hanging fruit. We have this wonderful jingle that we hadn't touched for several years. So how can we think about modernizing that in a way that helps wake up a brand new generation? And so the new concept, or the new commercial that we have out right now, is kind of a reimagined jingle. And so it has a bunch of songs that include the words wake up in them. So you think of like Evanescence, Wake Me Up Inside, Avicii, Wake Me Up When It's All Over. You have like Aretha Franklin, Say a Little Prayer the moment I wake up and put on my makeup, so on and so forth. And so it all kind of strings together in this beautiful melody. And then it ends with the best part of waking up is Folgers in your cup. And so it's been really neat because when we ran that through quantitative testing, the group that it scored the best with were millennials and Gen Z, and we had been struggling to break through that audience. And I tell you, the fact that like not only did we break through that audience, but it scored best with them was a pretty big testament to one, partnering with your insights team and understanding, what the core insight is, but two, leveraging a core asset and then just like reimagining it. It's truly important. And if you have that, special brand code in your portfolio, use it because it is incredibly important to you and your brand.
That, and you think about a sound campaign and what they're, to be built on is consumer insights. So that's obviously starting with a key consumer insight, which is grounding your brand. You're building a creative concept. So more back to the old traditional way that concepts come to life. Would love to understand though, how when you do something like that and bring this in your cup concept to life and waking up, how are you then building kind of an omni plan? How is your team building an omni plan to help bring that to life and reach all those, older audiences, as well as the millennial and the Gen Zers with this campaign to provide impact?
Yeah, good question. And so for a campaign like that, we knew like obviously like music is such a central component of it. And so we wanted to figure out ways that we could look into, do our analysis of how our tactics generally perform. We partner with a company called Keen. And Keen kind of gives us computes out like, these are the spend levels that you should be considering for the specific brand. And so one of the spaces that we knew with Folgers that does score really well for us is when we do audio. And so that was a huge component of this campaign because we knew we had a campaign that leverages music. We knew that it would play very well in audio, but we also knew that there were opportunities too to bring it into social, into influencer as well. And so social, we partnered with a lot of fun influencers that basically we have the song downloadable on TikTok, for example, and they take that song and then they leverage it in their content themselves. Same thing from a social perspective too, whether we're doing fun little like getting ready with me's or doing videos that are maybe a bit more recipe forward. There's ways that we kind of continue to weave that in, but then ultimately speaking, obviously it has to translate to that buy moment too. And so that's where like we leverage the ability to kind of like, we use Micmac as a company that we use quite frankly, or frequently, I should say. And, we use them to drive to product purchase all the time. Like I think a lot of brands used to consistently use the whole like learn more functionality and drive you back to their website or whatever. And we've completely gotten rid of that. Like you should always be driving to a buy moment all the time because quite frankly, we're such interesting shoppers nowadays. We're constantly bombarded with ads or Instagram posts or whatever else. Like you're kind of in a buy moment at all times. So depending on what content you're consuming, hit them right away with that ability to purchase.
Love that. Definitely something that we're seeing work really effectively when we can pull that moment up and allow that shopper to figure out kind of where to buy it, how to buy it, and get it into their cart. So putting your kind of commerce hat back on, a lot of the guests we have on this podcast are a little more in the commerce seats overall. And so always appreciate the brand perspective as well. Where does that like handoff happen? And in this case, you build this amazing campaign, which is pulling on the roots of this brand and modernize it and bring it to a customer. Now, how does that take shape when you think about Walmart and Target and the grocery channel and so on and so forth and kind of your key customers and those channel needs?
Yeah, great question. So I'm in a lot of ways, I'm kind of like in terms of building a creative campaign, I am like the tip of the spear for our brand team. With that being said, I have a person on my right hand and a person on my left hand. It's insights team and it's my commerce, my media lead. And so we're partnering hand in hand to drive a very well thought through consolidated campaign, because let's be honest, like not all of your awareness driving national media is going to work down at a Walmart or at a Target. You're going to want something that's a little bit more specific to their shopper. And so we do spend a lot of time in terms of identifying what are the RTDs that we know are going to perform well at shelf that still ladder up into our campaign that are complementary. How does that then sound in the Walmart voice, the Kroger voice, the Target voice? What products do we want to highlight? Because clearly, different products perform better at different retailers. And so we marry that all up together to make sure that, like, yes, you don't need to have matching luggage by any means on your campaigns, but it should be complementary and it should share a similar throughput story. And so we worked really hard on doing that. And so in terms of our commerce team or our media leads, they are along with us at the very beginning of the ride. They are providing inputs into the creative brief. They are viewing the creative alongside us to make sure that we are capturing inputs that might impact, what we need to think through at shelf. And then at the end of the day, we're partnering with them deeply on building out that tactical plan too. And so that we know that like the channels are going to resonate with the specific creative we're building, kind of like that example that I shared with Folger specifically, making sure that, we're capturing things that are a little bit more music oriented. And so we partner, but we're by no means silos. We are under the same roof for sure.
Totally. Yeah, that's awesome to hear. And just think about how it comes together and who the partners are and how you hand off. Moving over to your third brand, and this one is particularly interesting because growing up in Boston, New England, obviously Dunkin', has been a powerful brand to see their growth and see what they've done. I think even before we start, I imagine many consumers might see Dunkin' or Starbucks in, a grocery channel and assume that those brands are actually being sold, by Dunkin' brands and by Starbucks. Would you mind kind of talking to us a little bit through how that integration works with JMS and the Dunkin' brand, and then talking about the awesome new campaign that you brought to life for Dunkin' recently?
Yeah. So Dunkin' Corporate's owned by Inspire Brands. And so, but their retail presence is shared by several brands. And so we have Smucker's owns the rights to sell their bagged coffee and K-Cups, so on and so forth. Any coffee that you would find in the ground coffee aisle, we have the rights to sell that at retail. And so I think what makes this partnership with Dunkin' Corp very successful for hopefully both parties, we think so, is the fact that, we really truly treat Dunkin' as just another one of our brands. I certainly do. And so I'm a huge lover of the coffee itself. And the brand has such, fantastic just in terms of a coffee in the marketplace and kind of what they do from their own marketing perspective too. And so, it's just kind of a fun brand to kind of play around with. And so we try to, quite frankly, do things that are complementary to what they're achieving for their Dunkin' shops. And so we just try to do that from a different perspective, or the at-home experience. And so that joy that you get from visiting a Dunkin' shop, we want to make sure that you also share that same joy from the comfort of your home too, when you want to have your Dunkin' experience there. And so we worked on a new campaign recently called Iconic Home. And Iconic Home is a pretty cool campaign. And hopefully I don't know if you have links that you can share with the podcast or at some point, but would love to share it with folks here. But what's cool about it is it basically takes the bag itself, takes that Dunkin' bag and just pivots it slightly. And so you're seeing the side profile of the bag, but what you're seeing is it looks like a little house. And so when we crop it just right, it's wild to think that like a coffee bag, we had never thought of it before, but we kind of happened upon it. It looks exactly like a little house. And so Iconic Home was born from, quite frankly, a lot of restraint. And so I feel like so many marketers want to add so many, like you want to have the big headline and then maybe the sub headline. And we need to make sure that it has like extra. Oh yeah, perfect. Extra RTBs and things like that. You don't always need that. Sometimes the power is just in the simplicity. And quite frankly, too, as you can see here on the screen, the white space as well. You get that little house, you get the Dunkin' at home, you understand what the clear message is. And we're kind of thinking back into kind of like that commerce perspective and putting our commerce hats back on. You know exactly what you're buying. It is Dunkin' at home. And oh, by the way, look at all these different variety of blends and roasts that we have that are available to purchase. This was an incredibly exciting campaign to work on. We did a pretty cool film too. And it's just been an absolute kind of blessing that we happened upon this, but it also took a lot of courage to get there and to be okay with pulling back and really simplifying things. But I think the message was pretty powerful.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about, simplicity and just being concise with a message and providing for impact. I mean, the copy on that is so focused. The imagery, you're actually pulling packaging, which you can't always do in such a clean and deliverable format, but it's bringing that message to life. I know Duncan, I know the experience, and I can bring it into my home. And, sometimes I feel like these days we get lost in copy and concepts and just getting so crazy with the way we try to reach shoppers. And I think this is an incredible version of just going back to the basics and saying, like, what is the value? What's the benefit to me as a consumer? What are you going to create experience wise? And you guys did that in 3 words.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a firm believer in there's a methodology called, and my wife laughs at this. It's called Butilities. And so she gives me a hard time on this because it's basically finding that perfect blend of form and function. And so I strongly believe, and goes into our house too, like everything in our home can have both form and function. And so it should be inspiring to you. It should be beautiful to you. And so I think that campaign really embodies that idea, that little kind of like the art of the and, if you will. Like you could have form and function. And so it truly can be a work of art, but it can also get the point across of what you were trying to solve, the Dunkin' coffee. And then, what the whole idea of it was, that you could have it at your home and enjoy it and love it at your home. So, yeah, I'm a firm believer in that. You don't always have to be so salesy. If you're going to break through it, you need to have some art beyond just the function.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there like a second stage that you have now or you're working on, where I think about bringing Dunkin' home? Okay, that's awesome. You have the different packs, but a big part of that experience is then personalization. And how do I create whatever my cup of coffee is? What are some new ideas? How could I do that in my home in kind of a unique environment? Is that something that's on your roadmap, or how do you help to kind of connect the dots and give inspiration for someone to then create that drink that maybe the reason I go to Dunkin' is because I can't normally create it at home. I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, good question. And so would say, like, well, one, like when we are partnering on any of our campaigns, we try to do things that are curated and bespoke for the various people that are going to be enjoying our coffee brands. And so I would say that we spend a lot of time on building out recipe content and things that make our coffees approachable for the everyday person, because a lot of people will always say, well, gosh, I can't, I love that shop experience, but it's hard for me to mimic at home. One of the things that we really focus on too is trying to create campaigns that are both deeply authentic, but also ownable for our brands too. And so for us, with Dunkin', we know that like one of the wonderful ownable spaces is that, we are a fun brand. We are approachable, where, people think that we are very colorful and bright, and we're not, we're basically, when we do consumer research, we always love this question. What we learn from consumers is they always say, like, well, Dunkin' is if we were at a party with all the different coffee brands, Dunkin's the brand that I want to party with and hang out with.
Love that.
They're a blast. They're fun. And so, kind of our next campaign, as we're kind of evolving this, is continuing to be, how can we continue to kind of leverage what are some of our most wonderful assets from our Dunkin' shops, which is Dunkin' shops are a very flavor forward focused company, with all the fun donut flavors that you can get, the various, foods that you try at a shop. Trying to remember what are the fun little donut holes. Why am I forgetting what those are
Munchkins.
called? Munchkins. There we go.
My
Thank
girls
you.
are
That's what I was
obsessed with
searching for.
Munchkins.
Munchkins. Yeah. I mean, who doesn't love a good munchkin? But yeah, just kind of like lending a little bit from that dessert culture, the flavor forward focus. I think that's kind of going to be the next space that you'll see us start to really revolve around and play in, because it's a very much a differentiated factor for Dunkin'.
I love that. Taking the kind of business hat off for a minute, but you sit over 3 major coffee brands. I know personally that you are a seeker of taste, whether that's drinks or food or things. How are you making your coffee these days? What are some kind of new and innovative ways, or how do you bring coffee into your everyday?
Oh man, that's a good question. Okay. So I do, generally speaking, I do enjoy my Chemex. And so I do pour over. I am a little bit, thought this was a really unique thing that I did, but our insights team tells me I'm not that special. So what I generally do is I like both hot and cold coffee, like so many folks do now. People love both hot and cold coffee. So I brew a double batch in my Chemex every couple days. And so I take half that batch then and I just put it into my refrigerator so I have cold coffee the next day. And so I'm a big fan of oat milk. I think the toastiness of oat milk is a very good pairing and complementary pairing to your coffee. And so it kind of brings out those toasty notes, if you will. And so it also has a little bit more milk facts, so it doesn't feel too watery. And then sometimes with my cold coffee, I do like to play around a little bit. So I might use the blender, put in some ice cubes, maybe some, milk creamer or whatever else. And then, you can throw in, I don't know, like a banana if you want. And so you have like kind of like a fun little banana coffee. And so it's delicious. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not too precious about my coffee, but
Sure.
I do quite enjoy it. It's definitely part of my daily ritual. It for sure is my wake up. For sure.
That's part of waking up.
Yeah,
I love that.
truly.
Awesome. A lot of cool kind of creative concepts and campaigns that you've just talked about. And I know it's, you're the one speaking and you're the tip of the spear, but obviously there's a lot of people behind you that are helping with that, from agencies to consumer insights to partners, you name it. That being said, where do you channel creativity kind of on a daily basis, especially in this digital connected world that we're in and everything going on? You did talk a little bit earlier about comic books. I was just curious of like how you keep your mind sharp and come with the creative ideas coming again and again.
Yeah. So here's what I would say. Um, when you are in the creative space, I think one thing I would challenge anybody in that space is to don't be comfortable. And so I think the moment that you are incredibly comfortable is when sometimes that stagnation sets in, or things can get a little boring, quite frankly. And so if you are working in a comfortable space on your campaigns, they're probably not going to break through. They're probably going to be a little bit boring to the consumer. And so I would challenge anybody to get uncomfortable. And so when you are uncomfortable, and that usually for me comes from like going to new restaurants and trying different foods, traveling and putting myself in a country or a place that I've never been before, and so I'm a little bit out of my element. It could be challenging yourself to go to an art museum and see new art, or reading a book that you generally wouldn't read, or I don't know, watching a movie. This would do the same thing for you. Those are catalysts of growth for you. And so when you can challenge yourself to get uncomfortable and kind of push the envelope a little bit, that's when you're adapting. That's when you're living. That's when you're coming up with fresh new ideas. And so that is a huge, huge part of my own personal creative process, is really challenging myself to understand new point of views, to learn new stories. Because once I, kind of learn something new, oftentimes those things are going to pop into my work or my ideation, or just some of the refinements that we do in partnership with the many people on our team or with the agency. It just helps to make the work better. It helps to make it more impactful, sometimes more beautiful. And quite frankly, it helps it break through because you're being bold, you're pushing the envelope, you're being different.
That's really refreshing take. Love hearing that and searching for all those places for different inspiration and trying to just think about the things we do outside of work being an impact for growth and channel us inside of work. That's awesome.
Yeah, I would say work should be fueling who you are on the outside, but there's nothing to say that what's happening on the outside too can't fuel your work.
Love that. You also hit on something there I want to kind of double click on for a minute relative to partnership. And obviously, again, in your seat, you work with so many different groups and teams. We recently ran a session down in Bentonville called like Partnership in the Walmart Ecosystem. We pulled together everyone from merchants to WMCers to brands, marketers, vendor partners, agencies, you name it. And it was really cool kind of conversation going on. But would love to understand, just again, in your seat on the brand, like what does partnership mean to you, and how can partners in that ecosystem, like, anyone that I said and beyond, best work with you and best approach you in regards to the needs of a brand?
Yeah, I think bringing, first of all, I think conversation with people is so important. So we are so interconnected, and I feel like it's been tough in the last like 15 years because I think companies have really greatly changed, and now folks are wearing a ton of hats. They are stretched very thin, and those moments of conversation have oftentimes kind of turned into very transactional situations. And so I just
Right.
need this, like, just give me this and let's move on. And so I do feel like the times that you can pause and have a conversation with somebody that is bringing something, a fresh perspective, is hugely important. And so I love that you did that with WMC, because bringing people together to talk about how they can, go after kind of unique challenges and solve with unique point of views is going to come up with better solutions. And so I think anytime I've partnered with somebody, I always want to talk to somebody that is bringing a fresh perspective, that can help us achieve, maybe something that we hadn't unearthed or thought of before. Something that can certainly, unlock, some, solutions or growth for us that I hadn't thought of necessarily before. And so, I mean, we all come from different walks of life. And so those partnerships, so important to coming together with a much more well-rounded perspective. I mean, like you said, we have a ton of people that work on these campaigns from an agency perspective. We operate with a agency that operates a power of one model, which means they're taking from people from all walks of different agencies within their ecosystem to operate on our one business. We kind of replicate that too on our brand side and on our media side too. And so we have experts in all the related fields that are pooling together and partnering together to come up with our work. And so partnership is so hugely important, for so many reasons. But quite frankly, for me, it's because it just brings fresh perspective and different ways of thinking that I think is constantly forcing us to be bold and to evolve.
But yeah, fresh perspective indeed. I think another kind of follow up there would just be like, what brands do you see out there outside of your world and your category that like inspire you? Where do you look to for creativity? Who are some kind of brands that you admire right now, just doing cool work?
Great question. So there are several for me. I think, in our own industry, I think one brand that, I always, two brands, quite frankly, that I think always do fantastic work that pushes the envelope: Heinz and Oreo. I think a lot of people will say them, and it's for good reason. I mean, they're doing some stuff that is really unique. It's outside the box. It makes folks, I'm sure their leadership feels a little uncomfortable sometimes when some of these concepts are being, flashed, put on their desk. But at the end of the day, it's breaking through and it's getting people to talk because it's different and it's unique. And so we've tried to really start to take that mindset at Smucker too. And it's hugely important to me that we continue to take some really smart, calculated risks. So those are two brands that I greatly admire within the industry. I would say a brand that I admire outside of the industry that I'm in is Patagonia. I think that is, in terms of a brand that talks the talk and walks the walk, they're just unbelievably incredible for what they do, not just by making fantastic products that a lot of us know and love, but for having their brand stand for something bigger than just their clothing wear. And so I'm a huge fan of them too.
Also, I mean, those are three iconic brands doing some amazing work all the time. So good selection of choices there overall. Yeah, I think just to round things out, any closing thoughts or words of wisdom for those who are, trying to continue to re-innovate, whether themselves or their brands or their work? I think that, you've continued to do a great job of that over your career, as well as just in the seat that you're in, is continue to like stay current, channel creativity, look for outside inspiration to find ways to push things forward, across your career. Any closing thoughts on how others can try to channel that mindset?
Yeah, I thought you would maybe ask me this question. And so I was thinking through this last night a little bit. And one of the things I kept coming back to was, there was a quote that was really important to me as a college kid, especially when I first discovered it. And it's stuck with me my entire life. And so I wrote it down because it's got a couple sentences here, so I didn't want to butcher it. But it's from poet Rainer Maria Rilke. And it basically says this: be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves. Do not seek the answers which cannot be given you, as you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything, live the questions. And for me, that was hugely important. And it still is today because I mean, it's what it's saying is, be patient. Don't take shortcuts. Be relentlessly curious. If you can achieve those three things, you are living a life that will bring you joy and will bring you growth. And so, I'm a huge believer in living the questions. It's just to me, it's a way of, it's a mentality that I think will just bring you success. And so, that would be my, I guess, my closing words of wisdom, if you will.
I love it. I mean, I think the speed we all move and the pace we have deliverables and so on and so forth is so high that, time to step back and think and pause and have patience and be curious are words that I think many of us forget. So those are
Yeah,
deeply impactful. And, hearing it from someone as accomplished as yourself, I hope can, help create that impact. I know for me personally, I'm going to try to find some time in my days and life to dig a little deeper and look a little harder, maybe just stop, and, smell the proverbial roses around us and just understand the impact that things are having
truly,
around us.
truly, there's beauty around us. Just stop and take a look sometimes.
Awesome. I love it. Well, thank you again, Josh, for joining us on Break Time Off the Shelf. This is an incredible episode. I can't wait to get it out there and have everyone listen. And I'm sure we'll be talking soon, but good luck on all the launches you have coming up with these new campaigns.
Absolutely. Yes. Look forward to working with you guys again soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. Talk to you soon.
Cheers.
Bye.